All in all, a nice little weekend for the Brooklyn Nets. A buzzer beater by Kyrie Irving on Friday night against Toronto. A nice win, comeback win over the Detroit Pistons. Undermanned or under-talented Detroit Pistons, but a win is a win is a win, 124-121. Going to be breaking down all of the weekend's action, including a truly magnificent Kevin Durant performance with 43 points. We're going to do all of that right after the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, the Brooklyn Nets. Every single day, I am Doug Norrie, the owner and operator of dailyfantasysportsrankings.com, but you don't want to type all that in, dfsr.com. If you need some projections for FanDuel and or DraftKings, go check out dfsr.com. Got you covered over there. No Adam Armbrecht for the podcast today. Had to call this one out. That's all right. He saw the Pistons on the calendar. Thought it'd be a nice little easy rollover victory for the Nets. Said, I got something to do on Sunday. Not going to be able to make it. All good. We're rolling solo here on the podcast, obviously live on YouTube as well, where we already have a bunch of people checking in. So make sure you're going over to Locked On Nets. YouTube coming at you right after the Nets take down the Pistons 124-121 in a game that we're going to get to in detail, and a weekend that kind of sums up in a lot of ways the feelings around this Nets season. It's a W for Brooklyn. The Pistons were 8-23 coming into the game, and this one is a heck of a lot closer than you'd ever want it to be, considering this is the Brooklyn Nets, fourth in the East. Those are the Detroit Pistons, basically last in the East, and you think it's going to be an easy rollover game, especially with the good vibes coming out of the buzzer beater by Kyrie on Friday night against the Raptors. But things, as in true Nets fashion, get a little closer, a little more nail-bitey than you want it to be, even against a really bad team. They are, forced to claw their way back in the second half, but they do it. They get the W, and we get completely nuclear performances by Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. 43 points, like I said, for Durant, another 38 for Kyrie, and this one who follows up, obviously, the massive, like I said, buzzer beater there on Friday. And if this doesn't sum up the Nets season, or if this weekend in some ways doesn't sum up the Nets season, like, I don't know what does. It, like, the games are all close. We have two of the best players in the NBA rolling on the court when the balls roll out there every single game, in KD and Kyrie, who looks as good as he's played in a really long time. And we get nice little wins. And I think maybe the only thing you might be taking away from the Pistons win is saying to yourself, well, maybe it should have been easier. But again, when we get to the end of the season, are we going to be sweating out that they had to run a few extra minutes against the feisty Detroit team? Or are we going to look at the standings and say, hey, the Nets pulled off another W, like 19-12, fourth in the East, catching the Cavs here, climbing up to try to meet the Celtics and try to meet the Bucks. And these games over the weekend really sort of do encapsulate the Nets season. They're a super exciting team. They do not seem to want to always just boat race teams that they, talent-wise, are significantly better than, even when it looks like there's going to be times where they can pull away, or times where it looks like they didn't even show up to play. Everything in the end kind of ends up rounding out. On Friday, it's going down to literally the last second with a Kyrie buzzer beater over Van Vliet, where he has the beautiful separation step back to win the game, and then double holsters to kind of drive home the point after he makes, I believe, his first buzzer beater since he became a Brooklyn Net. And in this game, the Nets fall down. They allow 71 points, 71-54 at halftime to a Detroit team who, for all intents and purposes, completely stinks. They're 8-23 going to the game, second to last in the East, only because the Hornets are somehow even worse. Are they not last in the league? And yet they're down 15 at halftime against this team, and it takes a truly epic Kevin Durant performance in the third quarter to kind of get them rolling back into the game, and then Kyrie doing a little bit of your turn, my turn, which is fine, I think, in this respect, to be able to have the team claw all the way back in and ultimately win. And it just is emblematic of this season, man. It's been a really exciting season. It's obviously been really up and down, super frustrating at times. Sometimes it's hard to know how to label games or performances if you're frustrated by it, if you feel good by it. This has been sort of the theme of the season, right? Like, do we feel great coming out of the Toronto win? Obviously. Like, that one is a no doubter. You're on the road. It's a buzzer beater. It's Kyrie. It's awesome, right? It's like kind of jump out of your seat moment. And really, it's kind of every reason that you tune into basketball. So you're feeling awesome about it. You're riding high. It had been an extended layoff for the Nets where they had basically taken the whole week off before going into that Toronto game. Did look rusty to start, but ultimately come back with one of the coolest wins of the whole season, which follows up one of the other coolest wins of the whole season 3 games ago in that one against the Pacers. So it's been this really, really cool run that the Nets are on. And then I think when you're a Nets fan, you go into this game thinking, okay, we got an emotional high off the Pistons game, off the Raptors game. This is a nice landing spot here again, even in Detroit. It's a road game. They're still 8-point favorites going into it. This is a nice landing spot after an emotional one in Toronto to maybe just go out there and take care of business. Maybe we rest the starters a little bit. Maybe we kind of have to take our foot off the gas late, and because we're not too worried about it, we grab a little extra rest. We take care of a Pistons team that doesn't have Cade Cunningham, that's rolling Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes and Bojan Bogdanovic, ex-Net, out there, but not to really any great results. And then you watch that first half and you're like, what's going on with these guys? Like, what is going on? Where have they woken up? Are we going to need to have to mount some epic comeback in the second half? Like, what's going on? You're doing this head scratching moment because you're thinking that this is a team whose trajectory is pointed really, really in a nice direction. But they fall down early. They have to come back. The Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving completely lead the way, and you get there. And if that doesn't sum up the Nets season, like, I don't really know what does. Quietly, this team is 19-12. I say quietly because it doesn't, at times, it has not felt like they've been in 7 games over 500. They've now won 6 in a row. They're on it's the second longest winning streak in the NBA right now. And they're a team that obviously, by all intents and purposes, is headed in completely the right direction. And I think that sometimes it's just because we know what we ultimately want to see with this Nets. And by the way, they've won 10 of their last 11. I think it's because we know what we want to see with these Nets. I think sometimes we do what will go into these games with expectations that are just a little higher against an undermanned Pistons team to say, hey, there are some teams on the schedule here where it can just be a little easier than others. And at the same time, it's cool to tune in to basketball games that are super exciting down to the final whistle, that go possession by possession all the way down to the end of it. This is sort of why we end up tuning into basketball in general, because we want to see exciting things. We want to see Kevin Durant go completely nuts, turn in every piece that we know, that sort of the apex predator mold of basketball that he is basically known for, and to have it put on all display, to have him kind of rise up into the occasion. Yeah, they fell down early. Yeah, the Pistons are a worse team, but we still get to watch Kevin Durant mount a comeback. We still get to watch Kyrie Irving mount a comeback. So you get a little bit torn maybe emotionally around where you stand with this team. And I think, again, like I said at the top, this is really what ends up summing up the Nets season, this emotional roller coaster. Every game seems to be, not necessarily not what you expect, but every game seems to be a little closer than you think it would be. You have to get a little bit more out of the superstars. You can never really turn your eyes away from the television for too long because something's going to happen. They're not making it easy, but it's also making it fun. And I think, like I said, 10 of the last 11, this is an excellent run that the Nets are had. They played some of the coolest games of the entire KD Kyrie run over the last 5 games or something like that. And that's a cool place to be. And so I think that, in the end, yeah, it's a Detroit team, but it's a W is a W. And the Nets are right now on a really nice roll. I want to get into the Kevin Durant performance. I want to get into this Kyrie performance. I really want to talk about what Jacques Vaughn and company did with the rotations tonight, which were in some ways a lot different than we've seen from this team so far this season, which I find interesting. And I wonder if it's going to be a sign of things to come when it comes to how the Nets are going to roll. First, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. They figured this out. They just know how to make it easy for folks that are coming in that want to watch the games. They want to go more or less on some stats. They want to just go against the PrizePick player projections, and they just want to make some entries on PrizePicks and make it really, really simple. No salaries, no going up against sharks in the water on some of these other sites. Now, PrizePicks just wants you to look at their projections and say, well, I like that player for more points, more assists, less rebounds, more blocks, more steals, and that's just how we're going to do it. You pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times on any entry. It's just that easy. PrizePicks has figured this stuff out. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus those projections. They got NBA, NFL, MLB when that season rolls back around. Obviously, we're rolling through hockey right now, and the rest of the list over at PrizePicks is just too long to read. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Super easy, super fast and safe withdrawals. And they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play real daily fantasy sports. First-time users will receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100, but you have to use the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks is going to give you $100 back. Don't forget to use the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. All right. Kevin Durant. My goodness. I mean, we'll get to Kyrie here in a second. Obviously, it's a little hard to know which one to start with when one of these guys drops 43. The other guy drops 38. Kevin Durant, 14 for 22 from the field, 12 for 13 from the line, 3 for 5 from 3, capped off by a third quarter that saw him just go into the stratosphere. The best way to sum this up is that at the end of the third quarter, Kevin Durant had scored 26 points, and the Pistons as a team had scored 25 points. If that doesn't tell you how that third quarter rolled for KD, I don't know what it is. He was on a complete and utter heat check. 3 straight threes coming down the court, basically pull up. You could have pulled up from the logo, it felt like, and they would have gone in. He was just on one. And that, even those pull-up threes, like with a guy in his face, with a defender there, sort of like mini transition. They weren't full transition threes. Those aren't really something you see him do a ton. Like, he will do it from time to time. He's not a 3 straight possession kind of guy going down there and just jacking up threes, because that's just not really what his game is predicated on. For as good of a shooter as he is, that's just not usually what he does. But you could just tell that Kevin Durant was in a zone where he was saying, it does not matter where I pull up. It does not matter what defender is in front of me. You can bring a double if you want. It will not matter. I'm just going to rise up and I'm going to fire these threes and they're going to go in and we're going to be right back in this game and we're just going to win this thing. And when you see Kevin Durant go to that level, it is a reminder that when he is on, when he is in this zone, when he has got this bag going, there's almost no one in the NBA better. It is perfectly built and constructed for like the current form of basketball, really for any era, so it doesn't really matter. But specifically for this one, because he's able to extend out beyond the arc and shoot threes. This is a reminder of just not like we even need one, because the season he's having so far is in the short list of conversation around the MVP. So it's not like this game necessarily was going to like sway that all that much. This is already where he's been the whole season. But then when you get it so that it's just like possession after possession after possession, over and over, 3, a complete predator, a complete killer. It is like, oh, right. When it come playoff time, doesn't matter the matchup. These are the kind of things that this guy can do. The list of players in the league that can kind of pull this sort of performance out is very, very small. He is on the list. And when he's cooking, it is as fun to watch as anyone in basketball, because in a lot of ways, it's just different than anybody else, right? Like, you got a 6'11" guy who can just rise up even over double teams. And just when he's got that going, like, who's going to stop him? There's no defender in the league that can stop him. What makes him one of the most valuable players in all of basketball. And it's just awesome. Like, it's just awesome. Like, I was watching this. I take notes during the game, especially, a few more, even when I know it's going to be a solo podcast, because I want to be able to run down all the different stuff that's in the game. You want to just make highlights of the notes, want to make sure you're on the rotations, what players are on, which players are off, scores, all this, blah, blah, blah. This is all the kind of stuff that when you're rolling through a podcast, you do have to pay attention to. When you know you're going to talk for 30, 40, 50 minutes about a team, it's important to, know what's going on. And even during this time, like my notes from the third quarter stopped because it was just one of those times to just sit down and say, I think Kevin Durant just has this. There's no notes to take. Like, what are you going to take? He's awesome. He's amazing. He's one of the top 5, 3, lower or higher, best players in all of the NBA. Because when he's kind of rolling through, like he was rolling through today, that is a glimpse or a long look into just how freaking awesome this guy is. So he scores 26 in the third. The Pistons as a team score 25, like I said before. Overall, the Nets were able to get back into this game by outscoring the Pistons 44-25 in the third quarter. And then when he comes off the court, and Kyrie had kind of started putting some of this up in the second quarter, but continued on when they continued on in the fourth. Kyrie ends with his own 38 points. And it's not very often that you will score 38 points and have someone or some ones who cover a team have you be the second guy that's mentioned in a win. Like, score 38 points on 13 for 23 shooting, 5 for 10 of 3, 7-8 from the line, and have you be the second guy in line that gets mentioned at the end of a win for a podcast. Like, it's only a testament to how great these guys are. So yeah, Kyrie comes up second here, but it's kind of only because KD was the one who pulled him out to start. And could I have gone with Kyrie first? Sure. I mean, his performance was just as cool. He's coming up in transition with threes. He's finishing around the rim like we've seen many, many times for him. He's getting to the line. And Kyrie, there are times I think when Nets fans rightfully get frustrated with a your turn, my turn aspect of the Nets, especially on offense, right? Like, I think that we think of that as a bogged down style where it's just Kyrie and KD shooting, where if they're going to take a majority of the shots or they're going to just kind of trade off possessions. I mean, these two shot 37 of the 76 shots that the Nets had. So the two of them essentially took half the shots for the Nets. And that's just from the field. I mean, then they combined, oh, I just had this in front of me. Yeah. So they went 9 for 9 from the free throw line as well. So their usage rate is probably right below 50%, something like that for the whole team, and maybe a little higher when you count the turnovers if we're going true usage. So, but in the end, it's essentially your turn, my turn to some degree, not really, because these guys were almost going like, multiple possessions in a row. And at times that can be a frustrating thing for Nets folks because, when they're missing, it looks bad, right? Like when maybe the game is off a little bit or it's not totally working, that kind of offensive stuff can look stagnant and bad. The other part of this is when it's on, like it was tonight, you think to yourself, well, how many teams could beat them if they're going to play like this? Like if these two guys are going to take up all this scoring and this usage and be this efficient with their scoring, I calculated KD's true usage was like 76% or something like that. That was with a few minutes left to go in the game. Like if they're going to be this efficient on offense, then literally why bother passing, right? Like at that point, why would you ever want anyone else to shoot? It'd be completely ridiculous for you to even consider that, because when they're both rolling like this, there almost is no other point in anyone else taking a shot. The Pistons did a bad job of throwing double teams at these guys. They did it a few times, definitely not enough, especially when they got rolling. They did not do it enough to be able to really slow them down. So on the one hand, you're like, okay, well, this is just the usage is just a little too high for these guys. And at the other hand, you think to yourself, well, what would there to be done instead? Just very rarely you're going to want other people shooting. They did find open shooters from times. Obviously, Yuta hit a couple clutch threes from the corner. So there wasn't like no one took other shots. But in the end, when it's very clear that these guys are going to be rolling as efficient as it gets in the NBA when it comes to scoring, then there's that should be the whole offense. I don't think there's any reason to make it any other way. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the rotations here. We are on YouTube Live. I will stay after beyond the podcast as a reminder for some of those out there that we are rolling on YouTube Live. And when we do that, we get a little extra over there on YouTube. We'll answer some questions for all the folks. And there's a lot in there tonight that are throwing up questions. So make sure you stick around after the podcast over on YouTube. We'll do a little extra over there. Before that, got to talk to you about our friends over at ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online. You know that, right? But here's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Maybe you've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix, and believe me, folks, it can happen. Maybe there's just better stuff in some of these other places. ExpressVPN allows you to binge stuff like The Office, and you go over to the UK Netflix version for that one. You just sign into Netflix, you fire up the ExpressVPN app, you change your location to the UK, you refresh Netflix, and that's it. You're ready to go on all the content there across the pond. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. So just imagine all the different Netflix libraries you can go through. It's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service, Hulu, BBC, YouTube, you name it. ExpressVPN has got you covered over there. Hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason we use ExpressVPN to watch shows, just super fast. There's no buffering. There's no lag. You can stream in HD. No problem. If you want access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now. You can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon. expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. All right, we're going to close it out here talking a little bit about the Nets rotations tonight, which I thought were really, really interesting and different than some of the stuff that we've seen so far this year with just how the team is going to want to play. A couple things about this. I do think two things were at play here. I think one, the Nets are become very conscious of how many minutes guys like specifically Durant are playing this year, and they are looking to try as much as possible to head this off at the pass in actual games, like not resting them against teams like the Pacers and stuff like that. Nets fined, by the way, $25,000 for the injury reporting around that game when everyone just sat out. Clearly not injured. It was just rest, but sometimes that's you get bit a little bit by doing that. $25K in the long run for the grand scheme of things, for the Nets is like zero, but still, it's kind of a sign that says, hey, we noticed what you did there. We don't want you just resting guys and resting whole teams. But we've seen a little bit of a move by Vaughn and company to try to kind of manage themselves in game and also just work with different combinations that I think they hope are going to have some upside to be able to play more KD minutes. In this game against the Pistons, every available player except for Cam Thomas, interesting, played minutes. So they rolled with the usual starting lineup here of KD, Kyrie, Claxton, Royce, and Ben Simmons. But off the bench, every guy, Joe Harris, TJ Warren, Yuta Watanabe, Edmund Sumner, Seth Curry, and Markieff Morris all got minutes, some more than others. And some was sort of a mix and match style, I think, based on what they thought was going to happen. Joe Harris and TJ Warren were the first two guys in off the bench, and it ends up that Yuta Watanabe plays 26 minutes. Harris runs 18. Sumner runs 17. Seth Curry, interestingly enough, only plays 9 minutes in this game. Another thing that I thought was interesting about this one, in the first half, a little bit of this was foul trouble, but I think a little bit of this was actually purposeful. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant only overlapped for 8 total minutes in the first half. They ended up closing with a totally different group, and it was almost like a full line change they were running at times. They went with a really super big lineup, like when they subbed out Kyrie and at the beginning of during his first quarter rotation, they brought in Warren and Harris, and then they eventually brought in Markieff Morris and Yuta Watanabe and went with a super long lineup around Durant and Claxton. Then later, they went with a shooting lineup with Simmons, where it was Simmons, Harris, Kyrie, Royce, and Seth Curry. And those two teams, they're actually among some of those guys, there wasn't tons of overlap. It was almost like a hockey line change at times where they were doing 3 for 3 subs. And you usually don't see that a ton in the NBA, like that kind of subbing structure. It wasn't as prevalent in the second half when they sort of ended up dialing in on where they wanted to be. Obviously, Yuta was going to be with that group. Joe Harris played more with that group. The other guys like Seth Curry and Markieff Morris and even TJ Warren were really non-factors when it came to the second half. But in the first half, there really was like this very purposeful rotational mix that the Nets got into that we really haven't seen before. Again, a bit of this was Kyrie because he had some fouls, but not all of it. I think more of this was planned to try to get Simmons and Kyrie together with some shooters for offense, knowing that a KD-driven lineup without those other two could probably function on its own with a shooter or two and get by on the length of the defense, where they weren't going to have to overtax KD on the defensive end too much because you were going to have a lot of other long defenders. I thought this was a really interesting move by Vaughn. I also think that the number of guys that played in this game is important to note because we know there's only 240 minutes in an NBA game. You have to mix and match the minutes to work. But the more you play the other guys, the less you play some guys like KD. And if you can get these guys off the court, like KD off the court earlier, knowing that you can trust some of the guys that are coming in off the bench, like TJ Warren, knowing you're going to get a few more minutes, maybe at a Simmons here, knowing you're going to not overlap the Kyrie minutes as much because you're going to want him to handle some of the scoring, then you can actually claw back a minute or two over the course of every game, which is going to add up over the course of the season. So I think there really was a concentrated effort here to mix and match these lineups a little differently than we've seen before. 2, make sure that with the Kevin Durant centered lineups, we're not going to overly tax him defensively, knowing that he could carry a lot of the offense by himself. And then flipping that when he was off the court, making sure that it was a kind of a Simmons-led offense where he's going to play some small ball 5, because we know maybe the Claxton-Simmons pairing isn't going to work perfectly, but he's going to get surrounded by shooters and then have Kyrie be able to work off ball around him. And that's going to be the way the offense ends up going. So I do want everyone to let's check in on this as we go forward with some of these games, because I do think, having watched a lot of this stuff, with the Nets and how they run these rotations, this did have a slightly different feel to it. And obviously some of it was different. Like just the fact that Seth Curry was ready and available for this game and played almost no minutes, 9 minutes. And by the way, he only played 7 against the Raptors too. So I don't know if this is a sign of what's happening here with Seth Curry. I don't know if this is a sign of like what they plan to do going forward. We already know Patty Mills was already out of this game. Not like he was really in any games anyway. But if they're moving away from Seth here, or if it's maybe an injury thing or whatever is going on, it's just something to take note of here about what the Nets maybe grand plans are around some of these guys. It does look like guys like Yuta and guys like Joe Harris, those minutes feel pretty safe on a game-to-game basis, even with Harris he only played 18 in this game. Yuta played 26. And Harris played 23 against the Raptors off the bench. Yuta's been in the low 20s each of those times. But just something to keep an eye on, because I think that the Nets, as we go forward, are starting to find combinations for this team that they like. And we might start seeing some players that maybe aren't part of the plan here overall, or maybe they're not seeing as working together in the mix of what they're trying to do. And especially when a guy like Yuta Watanabe, who's obviously massive 3 against the Raptors, huge 3 in this game also, when he is starting to command minutes in the low 20s basically every time, that is going to have down chain effects on the rest of the roster. And we are going to see some other guys, probably, who we thought were going to play a ton of minutes, like Seth Curry, going, not a ton, but I mean a decent amount off the bench. The minutes have to go somewhere. KD's not going to lose minutes. Kyrie is not going to lose minutes. Royce O'Neal has shown basically everything that his minutes are pretty safe here. And then we have Simmons and Claxton. After that, if Yuta Watanabe is going to play minutes in the low 20s every single game, there's not too much else to go around for some of this bench. And the way we saw the rotations run here against the Pistons is definitely something we are going to want to keep an eye on going forward. Okay, we'll stick around here for a bit in YouTube. If you have a question or a comment, throw in at Locked On Nets in the chat. Make sure, if you're over on the podcast, that you are subscribed to Locked On Nets YouTube. We are covering the podcast every single day over on YouTube. Like I said, going to get some extra bonus stuff over on YouTube. And our goal right now is to reach 4,000 followers. We are less than 100 away. We wanted to get there before Christmas. We're probably going to do it. Give us a little Christmas present. Go follow Locked On Nets YouTube. It's totally free. It's just one click of the button. Hit notifications so you know when we're going live. We got you covered over there. Adam is the king of the quotes every single game. I always get to this point of the podcast and remember that I didn't have a quote fired up because that's Adam, who's always covering all of the great American poets to end the podcast. So I will just say we will be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. All right, I'm going to kick it live here on YouTube for a few. Whenever we're rolling solo here, there are other duties, and I do have some Locked On just network duties to cover here. So on the national scheme for Locked On, so cannot stay for a ton of time here, but will answer some of these questions. If you throw them up, stay for a few minutes here to to cover anything that I missed, which always kind of comes up with YouTube lives, is that I end up getting to the end of it 35 minutes and saying, oh man, I forgot about this and missed that and didn't do this and had this in my notes and this in my notes and that and that and that. And that's just kind of how it all goes here. Let me just go up here real quick. Faraz, do you think these offensive defensive switched JV makes the end of the games to be viable in the playoffs? I think right now they're probably still a player away from really being a deep run playoff team. Well, let me take that back. They're not a player away. They are either a player away or they are an ascension of a player that they already have on the roster. So what I mean by that is like a TJ Warren, like sort of showing that he can play 25 to 26 minutes a game at like a secondary scoring level and be able to stay in front of his guys. I like getting him would be as good as making a trade if he can get there. I'm not sure. He still looks a little discombobulated. Obviously, he had a traveling tonight. It still looks like he's not fully up to game speed. Not his fault. The guy's been, not played basically forever. So it's nothing anti TJ Warren there. It's just like this stuff can take time. Like this might take months for him. But I do think they're probably a player or two away from doing it. I think like lengthwise, if he were to be able to play and we were able to see Yuta continue on with even like some semblance of the 3-point shooting that he's shooting now, the regression is coming. The guy's not going to keep hitting 70% from corner threes over the course of the rest of the year. So I expect some Yuta 3-point shooting regression here at some point. In general, I think that they're probably still like a guy away, but I'm not exactly sure. Like, because it's always weird. Like the Simmons pairing is always weird. Kyrie is always going to get hunted in the playoffs defensively. You need guys that are going to be able to just kind of keep up with other sort of point of attack defender kind of stuff. And if Simmons can do that and he can get enough minutes out of him and Claxton together, I think that the rotations can make sense. I still think that we're not actually there. Are Kessler and Durant actual NBA players? I don't think the Nets think that. So there's not a lot of evidence right now that the Nets think that's the case. Definitely not with Durant. I don't know with Kessler. I don't know how long these guys are going to be on the team. Obviously, they're not rotational players in any form or fashion for what the team wants to do right now. I don't see that changing outside of like what we saw, in that Pacers game where there's just break glass in case of emergency kind of stuff. Outside of that, I'm just not really sure where like these guys really fit in. Neither of them are able to do enough. I mean, specifically Durant, they can't run switch stuff with him. Like they're gonna have to play drop coverage. He's still mistake prone. Some of this is like, look, they don't have a ton of reps, so I don't know what to expect. They haven't played tons, and there's just not a lot of minutes. If guys like Warren need to get ramped up, and guys like Yuta are playing this well, like where are the minutes going to come from? I don't really know. So I think for right now, I think that's where we are. I'm going to read a couple of these before I read them. Yeah, so Michael Stokes says, feels like Seth's lack of minutes is now a pattern. Do you think teams view him as a strong enough asset to get value back from him? Or do you think you never have too much shooting? I am of the group that you can never have too much shooting. I do wonder if there's like some injury stuff still going on with him or conditioning stuff going on with him. He's looked really good at times and he's looked like really, really bad at times. Sometimes I wonder if like that's injury stuff or conditioning because it hasn't looked super live on ball outside of a couple games here and there for him. So I actually kind of do wonder if there's something else going on besides just like not in the rotation anymore. Because I think Seth Curry, when he's rolling like we've seen him in the past, is clearly like an NBA rotation player. I don't think that's really in question at all. Even when you back out the problems on defense for the regular season, that you're not worried about that as much. Like teams like the Pistons aren't going to crush you on like teams like the Pistons aren't going to crush you on switches. Like, for instance, the Raptors, I can kind of get it. The Raptors were definitely hunting out Kyrie. Were definitely hunting out whenever they had small guards on the court. For sure, Toronto wanted to get the smallest guys in the lineup into actions, really against anybody, but like specifically with Van Vliet, specifically with Siakam. They were really working overtime in that game to do that. That is a problem. Are the Pistons going to be a team that you really get worried about with Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes, like running 2-man actions and, pick and roll stuff or just switching stuff to get into actions against Seth Curry? I don't think you're really worrying about it. And I think if anything, him not playing in this game is a little bit more of a troubling sign than against Toronto, let's say. Like back-to-back games, one of them being against a way worse opponent that's just not going to be able to brutalize some of the stuff that you don't do well. I do think it's a little concerning. Could be a blip, could be just nothing, could be just minutes, could be injury, could be conditioning. Like I'm not exactly sure. So I think but I definitely think it's for sure something we're going to want to keep an eye on because it's just something that stood out. Like I just don't know. I will say too, because I see this is a theme kind of coming up in chat here a lot, is when your guy isn't playing and your guy is out of the rotation, that's not usually a guy that other teams want to trade for. So I'm going to cover a lot of different comments here right now that I want to throw Curry into a trade, or like Patty Mills into a trade. If they're not going to be playing for your team, they're not assets. And if they're not assets, then you are going to have to attach another asset to have the trade be viable. So if their salaries are kind of okay for trades, which really neither of them are, like they don't make tons of money, maybe they become salary fodder. But if they're just salary fodder, then you're attaching something else. So if you're attaching Seth Curry in a trade for a real player because Seth Curry's out of your rotation, I just don't think that's going to work. And like for sure, Patty Mills, the guy's not playing. I don't know. You can't trade Patty Mills, or you can trade him, but you're going to attach like a first round pick or something like to him, or you're going to hope that someone likes Cam Thomas, or you're going to hope that there's something you can attach to it, because like you can't just trade Patty Mills. Like someone put in here Kuzma for Seth and Patty Mills. Like why would the Wizards do that? I don't know any world why the Wizards would want to say yes to that. Like, so I just would caution anyone putting in a player that doesn't play for the Nets anymore into a trade package that brings back a player that is playing for another team and is good, because the math just doesn't really seem to work on that in general. If anyone else has a question, make sure you throw at Locked On Nets in here, and I will stay. We'll roll through this for a few more minutes in here. I saw someone comment about Jock Vaughn's rotations. I actually think that I do think the Nets are still in a experimental phase with where some of these rotations are. One, I think that some of that is understandable. Like, remember, Kyrie was out for a large portion of this season. Not a large portion. He was out for a decent amount of games. Simmons has been out with injury. Curry's been in and out. Warren basically just started playing. Yuta Watanabe's been in and out with injury. Like, there are lots of guys on this team that have not played tons of minutes that are going to factor into this. I do think the part where there has been a lot of mixing and matching is to be expected, just because a lot of these guys just haven't played. I'll take this thing off. A lot of these guys just haven't played a ton. So I guess I just want people to understand that part of it. Like, Does it look a little helter-skelter at times? Yeah, but I do think there's a slight method to the madness, and I think part of it is that they have a lot of players that are just at different points of the timeline in ramping up or coming back or having not played together, and they actually just have enough real guys on this team that probably deserve longer looks and minutes, that when that is the case, you are just going to see more combinations and rotations. Like, because to not do it would mean some of these guys just don't play at all. And I don't know if you want that either, right? Like, if you're going to play 11 or 12 guys on a given night, then there are just going to be a lot of different combinations of those players. There's just simply no way around it. The math doesn't work any other way. So I think in this case, seeing lots of different combinations to me doesn't necessarily mean like Vaughn doesn't know what he's doing. I don't take it that way. I more take it like, hey, we need to see how some of these things work, because these guys haven't all been fully healthy here on the team at all the same time. And that's just the way it is. And so I think when that's the case, you're just going to see lots of different moves, and you're going to try to find out quickly in games if it's going to work, or you're going to see how a guy's looking and it's either going to work or it's not. And I don't know. I don't get the sense that there's like a throw anything at the wall and see what sticks kind of issue happening with the Nets here. I think it's more like, hey, we have a bunch of guys. A lot of them can really play. We need to figure out which combinations work, and we kind of need to make sure they're all still kind of playing on a given night, because we can't just not have TJ Warren play for 5 games, or we can't have Seth Curry not play for 5 games. And when you have that attitude towards your players, the guys have to play. And when all those guys have to play, there's going to be lots of different combinations. So I think that's where I kind of see this kind of situation. Yeah, this is a good one here. Are you worried about the lack of blowouts the Nets have had this season? It seems like we have to work hard every game. It sure does seem this way. I don't know if you caught the very top of the podcast, but this is what I talked about at the beginning, is that this is a consistent theme with the Nets, that while the Nets are, I didn't bring up this stat, but while the Nets are 19-12 and 4th in the East, they only have a 1.7 point differential. So as a comparison, the other teams in this range are the Celtics have a +6, the Cavs have a +5.9, so +6. The Sixers, who are underneath them, have a +3.3. The Knicks at 17-13 have a better point differential on the season at 1.9 than the Nets. This is all to say that the Nets are 7 games over 500, but a lot of these wins have been total nail biters. And is it a concern? I would like it to be different. I would like it to be a game where they played the Pistons here and they win by 25, and you can just get out of here and KD can play 30 minutes for sure. And I'm trying to get out of the mode of complaining about a win. So that's the other thing that I've been trying to make sure I don't do, is because we've done that a few times where we sort of complained about wins, and I, in retrospect, have not liked that we've done that. And so I'm going to really, really try hard not to do that. The NBA, on any given night, these guys are still NBA players. Edmund Sumner put it up really good when he was talking about the Pacers game, which was kind of getting dragged a little bit for that unit. They went out there and won, and he kind of took offense to it because he was like, hey, we're all NBA players. There's only so many of us. Like, it's a little disrespectful to say that, it's crazy that you stayed in a game. And after hearing him say that, I do think I shifted my mindset a little bit on sort of like the nature of a win and whether or not they should be blowing out teams. And I'm not as down on them when they don't, because are the Pistons bad? Definitely. Are they still NBA players? For sure. It's on the road. You're traveled. There's all these other externalities. So long story short, Rudy, do I wish that, am I worried about the lack of blowouts? No, but wouldn't be bad to have one every once in a while. Wouldn't mind having, if we get like a 20-point win every once in a while in here and get out of the door and, clean up and go to work and, leave work pretty quickly. Yeah, I would definitely wouldn't mind that. So not totally concerned, but I will say that point differential speaks to sort of like the nature of this net season, which is they've gotten blown out sometimes and all their wins have been pretty close. And that is, you can sometimes live on a razor thin margin there, which can come back to bite you or make it look like the record is maybe a little better than what you are. And like, if you're going to play close games and you have Kevin Durant, then you probably are going to win a few more of those than you lose. And that's just kind of the way it is. This is interesting. Kyle says everyone brings their 120% against the Nets. Is just the reality. Like, do teams play harder against the Nets? I think that's probably true to some degree. I mean, they look across and see KD, they see Kyrie. I mean, other NBA players, from what's been accounted for, like love Kyrie, or a lot of them look up to him because they really like his game and they like him and whatever. So, do I think other teams get up for the Nets? I think that's probably true. It's hard to judge like energy when you look at our teams. We talked in the past about how the Nets are pretty bad against the spread, which means they don't tend to win games by as much as, analytics would think that they would on a game-to-game basis. So I guess that's like a little troubling, but it's hard to like judge if like teams bring it harder or if the Nets allow other teams to just kind of get easy baskets. Like I think sometimes that's I think that's a little hard to judge. Seeing if there's anything else in here that I can bring up. Really appreciate everyone jumping in here. More and more people keep coming over to these YouTube lives. I'll say it one more time. If you're in the YouTube live and you haven't hit subscribe, make sure you hit subscribe to the podcast. And because as we're going to try to get to 4,000 subscribers. I think we're definitely going to get there before Christmas. But make sure if you're in the chat right now, which I see a lot of people are, and you are not subscribed, just go up there and hit that subscribe button. That will really, really help us. And if you want to throw one or two more questions in here before I get out the door, I can try to bring it up. We saw some. Appreciate the YouTube live idea is awesome. Appreciate that one, Rudy. Blowouts aren't going to happen until we shut down the layup line. I do think actually, this is something I meant to mention on the regular podcast, was one problem you will see from a team that has a lot of lineup rotational turnover and a team that plays a heavy switching style like the Nets do. This will be a byproduct of that because switching takes a lot of communication. And if the defensive communication is not totally up to snuff because there's just not a lot of time together, that will lead to a lot of this stuff, like easy layups. Like, for instance, there was a play tonight where it was Simmons. And I can't remember who the other person was. It was Simmons and another guy and shoot it. Well, anyway, Simmons went to shoot over the top because they were going to switch, but then Simmons tried to shoot over the top because he thought, I think it was Bogdanovich. It was either Bogdanovich or Ivy was going to go left and come over the second side of the switch. And they didn't. So Simmons gambles, comes over, and then it leaves the other side, like sort of like the weak side of that switch, completely exposed, and it's a layup. I point that out because this is sort of what happens if you're going to run a switching style, from my understanding. And look, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. If you're going to run a heavy switching style, that's going to take a ton of communication about like where you're going to end up in every single switch and every single defensive assignment. Communication is a big part of that. Time together is a big part of that. And when you haven't spent tons of time together, like, you are going to see defense with what looks like maybe lazy defensive lapses, but sometimes it's just because of lack of communication or lack of understanding of what the other guy was going to do. So I think that at times that is what breeds a lot of what this layup line kind of stuff looks like. Because yes, the other teams do seem to get to the rim extraordinarily easily against this team. And I actually don't think it's all because they don't have like a rim protector or something like that. Like, Claxton's among the best rim protectors in the league. So it's not so much that. It's that I think it's more that some of their defensive miscues and communicational stuff, like they had a couple of guys that ran like these like mini Iverson cuts at times, and guys didn't know how to follow completely correctly. And I just think that might be part of the problem as much as it is as everything else. So I forget what I was responding to specifically there. Oh, the layup line thing. Yeah. So I actually think with their style, you will see more of that just because they want to play a heavy switching style. This is why I don't think they're going to bring one of these bigs that everyone wants to bring in through the door. Like these slow, big, lumbering bigs are going to have to play drop coverage with. It's just like not how they want to play. Like when you have Simmons and you have Durant and you have Claxton and you have these guys that are like really, really switchable. I mean, even Royce O'Neal is really switchable. Like when you have all these super switchable guys, like I don't know they're not going to bring in a slow lumbering center. They have a slow lumbering center. His name's Daron Sharp. They don't want to play him because he doesn't fit the style that they want to play. And so I just don't think that is something we're going to see, because I just don't think another guy like this matches like what they want to do. And because of that, I think we will continue to see some of this defensive stuff where other teams are going to get easy baskets at times. You're also going to see where that style created complete havoc for the Pistons at times in the third quarter and fourth quarter, when it was very hard for them to get into actions, where the Nets were shooting lanes, where the Nets were getting their length really in and tying up some of the ball handlers. Like, it goes both ways with this kind of thing. So I just don't think that the layup line problem is because of like the Nets just don't have some tree trunk center with his roots planted in the lane and just stands there with his arms up and blocks the lane. Like, the Nets don't want to play that way defensively. The rest of their personnel is not set up to play that way defensively. So I just don't think that they're going to do it. And I don't think anyone's going to care, because I think people just see names like Drummond and see names like Whiteside that I'm seeing thrown out there, Mo Bamba, who we talk about every time. Like, I think they see these guys and look, whatever, they're fine. Like, Bamba's fine, whatever. But I think they see these other guys and they think that's the solution, but I actually don't think that's the problem. Totally. Okay. I think we are going to get out of here. I really, really, really appreciate, I hate when there's so many people in here to get out of here, but I got other stuff that we need to do here for the Locked On Network, and got to post the podcast, all this other stuff. So I really appreciate everyone jumping in here. We'll be live again after the next game. Obviously, Adam and I are coming out here 5 days a week on the Locked On Nets podcast. Really, really appreciate everyone jumping in. Gonna kind of bring this to a close now. Again, subscribe over on YouTube. Visit our friends over at ExpressVPN. Visit our friends over at PrizePicks to just jump on the different offers that we threw out there over the course of the podcast. Nice win over awesome win over the Raptors with the Kyrie buzzer beater. Really, in the end, a win is a win here against Detroit. We'll take it. KD and Kyrie put one on. We will be back again talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. Really appreciate everyone jumping in. Be back tomorrow.